officially been podcasting for 1 month. And did anybody watch or listen? You'll have to stay tuned to find out. If you have not been able to catch an episode yet of my new podcast, Building in a Small Town, don't worry, you can watch it after this video. The only one that I would say maybe don't watch, because it was my worst interview for sure, like worst performance as an interviewer, is episode 2, where I interviewed my husband, because interviewing your spouse is really hard, and I just didn't realize it at the time that it was going to be as difficult as it was. But I digress. I started this podcast. I bought the equipment for it back in July of 2023. Officially got serious about putting it out in the world the very end of December. So I sat down and recorded an intro. I believe it was December 31st or December 30th. After I figured out how to use my audio recording tool and all of the things in that, at least I learned the very basics of it. Sat down, recorded an intro, and started working on editing that and getting it uploaded, establishing an account to be able to produce an RSS feed, which is what you need to have your podcast on the podcasting platforms that you typically think of. So I did that on December 30th, December 31st, not sure. Definitely posted it by December 31st, and then sat down the next day to record my first episode about, my story and how I felt like starting this podcast and what the plan was and the main theme was going forward. So that was the very beginning of January that one got released, and initially, and still continues to be my plan, was to release 1 episode a week of interview style podcast. So I really don't want this to be a me just talking about things podcast. I think maybe I'll sprinkle some things in. Maybe I'll do some sort of a summary episode after a certain number where I talk about the biggest takeaways, things I've learned, things that I really liked, but that's to be determined later. In the beginning, I wanted to keep it as simple as possible and interview people. My husband Willie got to be my first interview because, he lives with me. I forced him to participate, and it was good for me to practice and figure out if I could figure out how to do 2 audio tracks in my Zoom recorder and all of that kind of thing. So that's why he was my first interview. I also, before I started this, thought that I was going to have a set list of questions that I was going to ask everyone. That quickly went out the door as my husband live critiqued me through that entire episode of what was wrong with my questions. And I also, I think of myself as a pretty decent conversationalist. I don't need necessarily fallback questions. There's certain questions that I do tend to ask every guest, and as you continue listening to my episodes, you'll notice which ones I ask. But I find having the laid out plan just doesn't make for an authentic conversation, which that's the whole goal of everything. So the plan was interview style because that was going to be easiest. And then the next plan, or lack of plan, was whatever I could do to make this as simple on myself as possible. So that meant that I was not going to be going in and editing any major audio things. Obviously, if it was something egregious, I could go in and try and figure it out, but I had to lower my barrier to entry to get this thing started and get it moving. And that was just a decision that I made in order to get myself going and get some momentum. I'm super glad that I did that, but I think there are some things I am definitely gonna have to figure out as I continue to grow this and as the audience continues to grow. There are just certain pieces of feedback that I've gotten from over and over again that make me, a little bit conscious of the things, and definitely areas for improvement. But I'm also keeping in mind that I have time and effort and everything else limitations, that this whole thing is meant to be a fun creative outlet for me. And so just to not lose sight of that and keep my barriers to entry and my touch in some respects as low as possible. So there's definitely some audio things that I can improve for sure on the video. There's some things that I can improve. One of the things that just keeps on coming up on the clips that I put out, one thing that comes up, which I now, as I'm making clips. It just keeps coming up over and over again, but I have it in the back of my mind. People have been annoyed at the lack of context with some clips. Makes total sense, but the purpose of those clips is to try and get you at least interested in what the rest of the things that the guest has to say. So having all the context is just not possible in 1 minute in an hour plus long conversation, but also it's just meant to be a teaser. It's meant to be I wouldn't call it a sizzle reel, but it's just meant to be a teaser to try and capture people's attention to hopefully bring them to the full episodes. But I do fully understand that some of the clips that I created in the first month were definitely lacking context, and I don't think they were necessarily strong enough to just stand on their own as a clip. Perhaps. Also, perhaps it's just trolls on the internet, but whatever. So the second thing that I've gotten a lot of feedback on is with the video itself. I've had multiple people say, like, you need to turn your mics on, like your mics aren't working. The mics are working, I promise. It's just that I shoot all of my videos, including this one, on my iPhone. And the reason that I do that is because it keeps it super simple. It's easy for me to edit within an app that I use that I'm really familiar with. And yes, that means that the audio quality is not going to be as good as it necessarily would if I could figure out how to plug my mics or my recorder into my phone as the audio thing. I just haven't figured it out yet. I don't have enough time. I have a lot of other things going on while I'm doing this podcast. So those are things that are certainly going to be improved. And then one of the other big things that as I move forward, it will not be adjusted for a few months, but I'd really like to start recording some sort of like an intro track where I sort of summarize who the guest is, some of the things that you maybe will hear in the episode. I just think that's important, and it's something that's lacking right now. But again, if I tried to do all of those things at the beginning, I never would have started. So with that, I do understand there's lots of things to be learned and all that, but there's so much that I learned in the first month of podcasting. So let me grab the numbers, let me go to the numbers, and you can find out how many people actually watched or listened to this podcast in the first month, and how many episodes did I record, because it was kind of a lot. But if anybody who knows me, I go hard. I go hard when I decide to do something, and this podcast was absolutely no exception. So to the numbers. So for the month of January, or my first month of podcasting, shall we say, it should be noted that I upload my podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. YouTube has a podcast section. If you didn't know, now you know. It doesn't have like a video necessarily on it. It's just like a static image. It's whatever the episode art is for that particular podcast, but there's like an actual podcast section. I think I had heard whispers of that, but I didn't really know that it existed. So it's really easy. If you have an RSS feed, you just add your RSS feed in there and it uploads automatically. It's kind of nice. So the other thing that I do on YouTube though is I put up a video of the conversation. Again, the audio quality is not as good as the actual podcast platforms, but I wanted to capture the video and have the long form video. For me, it's just an easy content producer, something that I can upload to my channel that some people will watch, some people won't. But then, like I said, I do drip out clips prior to an episode's release, and that has been my main mode of promotion for my episodes. So that's why I do the video, and I already have the whole video, so I might as well just use it. So that's the plan. Anyways, like I said, let's get to the numbers. So in the month of January, I had 12 total episodes recorded. Yeah, 12 in a month. It was a lot. Still feels like a lot as I sit in February, but I'm on a time crunch for things that I can't talk about now, but I'll talk about later at some point in the future. And so I needed to get as many episodes done in a short amount of time as I could. And so 12 of them got recorded in January. I will say that interviewing is certainly a skill, and I feel like I have gotten better at it as the month has progressed and each of my episodes has gone. I have gotten slightly better, I think, at not repeating myself a million times or verbalizing my pauses as much, but it's a work in progress. 12 episodes though, starting to get the hang of certain things. Of those 12 episodes that I recorded, only 5 of them were released. Again, this is because I am going to stick very strictly to the schedule of 1 a week for the foreseeable future, but that could change at some point. But so 12 of them are recorded, so those recorded episodes are going to end up releasing through more months. That'll get me into March-ish with those 12 episodes that were recorded. Like I said, I uploaded to podcasting platforms and YouTube. And so as I look at this from a statistical standpoint, I'm looking at total views and total listens, because watching or listening to my podcast, it doesn't matter. You're getting exposed to the content either way. So the total podcasting platform listens in January, my first month, is 128. I had 0 expectations going into this. I didn't really have an audience that I have the audiences with my businesses and, other things that I've done. So I think for sure my mom and my mother-in-law, I knew I was going to have 2 watches and listens every episode because they love me. So I knew that, but otherwise, I just didn't have any expectations, shall we say. That's across all the podcasting platforms. So that's your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify, and I don't know that the YouTube statistics go in there, to be honest. I'm not certain how that all meshes together, but I know that on my Spotify for Podcasters dashboard, it's 128 of the listens on the podcasting platform. Total Spotify followers, so this doesn't include Apple subscribers. I'm actually not entirely certain where I find that information yet. I imagine there's an analytics panel on that side, but I just haven't found it yet. But so total Spotify followers is 16 after a month. So total YouTube views, which this is, where I already have a little bit of a platform. I have 4,500 subscribers, which is not huge, but it's better than nothing. I got 436 total views across YouTube on my podcast episodes, bringing my total views and listens for the month of January, my first month of podcasting, to 564. I personally am thrilled with that. Like I said, I had no expectations going into this of anybody listening. I think of this podcast as scratching my own itch, and I am my own target market. I'm just really curious about what other people are doing, and I love a good story. So I went in with no expectations. So 564 in 1 month, again, with no paid promotion at all, just straight hustle of clips and posting it to all of my different platforms that I already have. I'm really happy with that. But that ends up averaging out to about 113 watches or views per episode. So that's just 564 divided by 5. But you might be asking yourself, what were my top performing episodes? So my top performing episode on Spotify or on my podcasting platforms, because again, that is all combined into one, was episode 3 with Robbie Erickson. He is the ultra running tattoo artist that is right across the street. He's awesome, got a super cool story. Highly recommend that episode if you have not listened to it. Just a fascinating human being. I probably could have talked to him for another 2 hours. And then my top performing episode on YouTube was episode 4 with Dan Fitzpatrick of Right Now Powder Coating, and he's just a stone's throw away. That makes total sense though. He has something like 15,000 plus YouTube subscribers, so he's kind of already got a built-in audience there. So that doesn't surprise me that he ended up skewing heavier towards YouTube. So both of those conversations, I really enjoyed them. Go check them out. But overall, 1 month in, I am really, really enjoying this little project of mine. I would love to figure out how to generate some revenue from it. Eventually get some sponsors or things like that. But 1 month in, these are my stats. I am not sure the cadence of these videos. I don't know how often I'm going to do them. Maybe quarterly. I do want to kind of keep it updated for someone who's maybe getting into podcasting. What can you expect? For someone who doesn't have like a giant following, it's very different if you're like an already established celeb. I feel like it's easier to start a podcast and gain an audience, but I'm just a regular old girl from Iowa and started a podcast, have an idea, have a vision of what I want it to be. So I really want to document this as it gets built. I know there's going to be some of you that are podcast listeners that end up watching this, and then some of you that are never going to listen to my podcast, but maybe are getting into podcasting and just kind of want to know what it's like 1 month in. So these were my statistics. Yours might be very different, but I'm excited to, capture this as it builds, because it's going to continue to build. I'm going to say let's do this quarterly. 1 month just made sense because I'm 1 month in, and again, get the ball rolling as fast as you can. But I'm going to guess that my next one will probably be April-ish. Let me get through that first quarter, so end of March, gather all the statistics, and come back again in April and see where we're at. If we have some more people listening, maybe we'll have nobody listening. Maybe I'll lose listeners. Hard to say, but all I know is I'm really, really enjoying this, and I can't wait to see where it goes. So thanks for tuning in. If this was interesting, like, subscribe, comment, share, all of those things. If you have any constructive feedback about things that might help in terms of audio and video and stuff like that, but with the caveat of it has to be easy to implement, because I'm just not interested in something super complicated right now. Maybe if it starts generating some revenue and taking up more of my time, or I have more time to give it, then yes. But otherwise, keep it simple. Just go start something, go build something. Thanks for being here.